Hello, hi. Yeah, thank you, Johnny, and a really interesting discussion. My job's easy today, to be honest. How does it stack up? This is my fourth How Does It Stack Up I've spoken at, and it's been the most digital talked about How Does It Stack Up. I am one of those expensive consultants that sells you sexy digital things, or I'm a sexy consultant that sells you expensive things, one of the two. And I'm here to talk about digital disruption, namely what's happened in the past, what digital's caused, what effect that's had on communications, what effect that has had on business, and also what you need to do about it. So in the spirit of the day, How Does It Stack Up is 10 years old. Johnny's right, we thought we'd do a little bit of a trip back in time and have a look at where we've come from. Because 2005 doesn't feel that long ago. For me personally, I was a couple of years out of uni and living in Australia and things were quite good. It doesn't seem long ago. But the iPhone wasn't out in 2005. It was still a year away. The first iPhone was a year away. In terms of broadband, here in the UK, about 15% of you had a broadband connection. In Australia, it was about 2%. We were struggling with the whole indoor plumbing thing. So you can keep your broadband if we get the ashes, it's fine. So that's what it looks like. And so let's have a look at the world. This was it. Anyone from Rio Tinto in the audience? No, didn't make it in. This is what corporate websites looks like back in 2005. It's not completely unfamiliar. They had 1, 2, 3 photos on there, rather luxurious of the time. But you can see it's very functionally led. It's the text links. It's easy to get around. You could tell it's kind of a mining company. There's a big picture of a rock. But it's not that unfamiliar. When we look at someone like Unilever, for example, you can start to see, I guess, the foundations of modern web design and the things that we're familiar with today. So the priority information at the top of the page, trying to do more with the design as well. We were really limited 10 years ago about what we could do. The connection speed was the killer. So if you did have images, remember they used to write down the page as you loaded and you'd have the dial-up and all those things. So they had to be quite functional. And we were still designing in this. This is a website designed in Flash. Apple effectively killed this technology about 2 years later. But it was great. It was fantastic. Anything you could think of, you could create. It was also horrible because anything you could think of, you could create. So you really had to put a lot of self-discipline on it. This is Antofagasta's website. I know they're in the crowd. Antofagasta's greatest treasure is either that rock or that man. I couldn't work it out. But this is where we've come from. Social media was in its infancy as well. So the social channels that we know and use today didn't really exist so much. This one did, though. We're not the only ones celebrating a 10-year anniversary. 10 years ago, YouTube was launched, and this is the first video that was there, a rather inauspicious start of me at the zoo as the title, and yeah, it's him at the zoo. But from there, we're now here where there's more video uploaded into YouTube in a day that you could ever watch in your lifetime. So amazing growth. Twitter didn't exist in 2005. Flickr was around. It was sort of just getting off the started. The big social network of the time? Hey, who remembers? This is MySpace in 2005. If you were in your mid-20s, like I was then, you probably remember this very well. It had about 25 million users at the time. Everybody's favorite Australian, or second favorite Australian, Rupert Murdoch, would buy it. This in 2005 for 580 million US. He'd sell it 6 years later for 30 million. Not a great investment on behalf of Rupert. And also, interestingly, they had the chance to buy Facebook for 75 million US. Thought it was too expensive. It's now capped at 245 billion, so a little bit of an error there. He got his payday, he's happy. So this was it, and we didn't see a lot of corporates in that space. We had a really good trawl around, but there wasn't many. And there was a few consumer-led ones, but not corporate. Speaking of Facebook, if you tried to access it in the UK, this is what you would have gotten in 2005. You couldn't use it unless you were a student of a college in the US, a university. It was still the Facebook. There was about 5 million users at the time. This was probably the last year before Facebook really exploded. So those are the things that we saw. But the world changed over that 10 years. A lot of things happened. It means we can do the exciting and interesting things that we can do today. Particularly, computing power just exponentially increased. So all of a sudden, we weren't limited by technology like we used to be. The connection speeds kept pace with that. So that was the massive one in terms of web design in particular. Mobile, I mean, everyone in here has a phone, everyone's checking their emails, hopefully not right now. That really did change the game and continues to change the world. And software, there was a real democratization and acceleration of software development. So, we now have 12-year-olds in primary school that are programming mobile apps. Who would have thought that 10 years ago? Unbelievable. And we can start to do some really interesting and nice stuff like this. So this is SAB Miller's corporate website, the best corporate website in the FTSE 100 according to our latest research study. But you can see, massive images, interactive features, a bit of storytelling throughout, a real publisher's mindset, and still very user-centric and useful, and all those things that we talk about. And all the way down to reporting, Anthony, it gave me a lot of professional satisfaction to see the journey that Vodafone had been on, to be able to see what we can do, and moving images of the online report and understanding who this is for, who the online version of the report's for. It hasn't just changed communications. I'm going to get a bit digital. It hasn't just changed communications, it's changed business as well. So to steal a quote from Tom Goodwin, Uber is the largest taxi company in the world. It doesn't own a single vehicle. Airbnb is the biggest accommodation provider in the world today. They don't own any rooms. You can say the same thing about Alibaba as the most expensive retailer. Facebook is a content publisher. It doesn't own any content, doesn't publish any content. So it's completely changed how we do things and what we do. We talk about the concept of digital maturity, and that's about taking a more sensible and practical approach to what you do in digital. It's really tempting in digital to do the latest and greatest, and to Peter's point, who's run out, damn it, to Peter's point is, it's expensive and it's sexy and all that stuff. We've got a different take on that, and it's about doing what's right for you as a business. There's three lenses to that you need to consider. The first is digital excellence, and that's about making sure that everything that you do on your external channels, you've got a best practice mentality to do that. You understand what you're doing, why you're doing it to the best of your ability, and you're able to support that on a long-term basis. Digital disruption is about being willing to innovate. The absolutely refreshing thing I heard from the panel today, and also the practitioners at the start of the day, was the willingness to innovate, experiment, try different things, and work out what works. Digital does rely on that. And finally, digital leadership. Setting the conditions for success within your organization to make those types of things a reality. Because if you don't do that, you're going to get a lot of heartache. You're going to get a lot of pain. You do those things together, you're really representative of an organization, we would say, has a high level of digital maturity. So that's great, Cam, thank you. What does that mean? I'm a reporter. What does that mean? So this is probably the time that you can take out your scribbles and make your notes, because this is where the advice comes. We talked about the rising importance of digital. Everyone's talked about it today in some way. If it was me, these are the things that I would focus on in the first instance, because everyone's on a journey, but this is the place to start. First of all, audience first. We've heard it mentioned a couple of times. Investors and analysts want a PDF, back to Deepa's a research report that put a dagger through the heart of a lot of us. But it's about understanding who they are and what they want and in what format and in what way. Really make sure that you're working with people within your organization to understand that. Think wider. The Berenson stuff, it was fantastic. It's not just a printed document. Don't just think of it as, I get to a printed document, then I can relax for 3 months, and then I start again. Understand how you can take that content from your report onto your website, onto your social channels. Anthony's stuff about getting it internally within Vodafone was fantastic. Think of it as a content generation process. Yes, it's a people project, as we were talking about earlier, but do think about it as you have this amazing library of content. It's an excuse, right? Reporting is an excuse to improve the way you communicate who you are and what you do and how you create and sustain value. Focus on what works. Don't just do something for the sake of it because you're blinded by the digital. Understand why you're doing what you're doing. That is attributed to understanding your audiences, but also understanding your business. If you are a holding company, if you're a large B2B organization, do you need to get all your reporting stuff out on your social channels? Is that going to work? That's up for you to decide, but do what works. There's some great research out there. Deepa mentioned the reporting lab at the FRC, do some fantastic reports. Please look into them. Or give us a call. We're always happy to talk. Measure and improve. For 4 years, I've been up here. For 4 years, I've said you have to measure what you do. It's getting better. You're getting much better at it. Anthony's stuff today was fantastic with the internal, here's our measures of success, so click-throughs and open rates and all that type of thing. It's really important that you're doing that for all your reporting content on your website, on your online reports, how many people have downloaded the report, etc. Because what that means you can do is you can improve as you go along. It's hard to evaluate success if you're not measuring anything. So work with your analytics teams or your digital teams or whoever's responsible for your digital measures or your PR measures within your organization and set KPIs with them. Don't just go away and think about it by yourself. Set KPIs with them. Look at how you achieved, how you went, left a bit, right a bit, and improve that as you develop. Experiment and innovate. Back to the digital disruption element of digital maturity. And this is language, again, directly from the FRC. Good digital communications requires innovation. It requires experimentation. Now, corporate cultures don't have a high tolerance for failure. So I wouldn't want you to bet the farm on some fancy piece of digital that you're going to align yourself to. Just a lot of little bets. So what can you do about making your business model more interactive, more easy to consume in an online space? Peter's point, yeah, don't just put all your reporting into an app. How can you give your board the tools they need to present their business? Is it the report? Is it something else? So be willing to experiment and to just think a little bit wider than the report. Make friends. We talked about it already, the importance of early in the reporting process bringing in the lawyers in the first instance, corporate affairs, investor relations, etc. I would personally like to make that wider. Comms, brand, IT. You don't want to turn it into everybody, but if you bring people in early, they're invested. They're aware of what you're trying to achieve. There's a common goal, there's a common outcome, there's a common ambition. When you do go to them and you need support and you need help, it's just going to be that much easier. It doesn't have to be adversarial. It can be much more collegiate. And finally, be accountable. So your organization needs you to be the strong leader to set the standards for what fantastic reporting looks like in the digital space. You need to be that person, and you need to drive that agenda internally. You're here, so you're obviously interested in what is best practice. It's just as much about what is happening inside your organization is what actually ends up in the book. Why does that matter? Well, that's my funny slide. Why does it matter? You are responsible for more than the production of a printed book. You're responsible for more than the production of a microsite. It is on you, really. You are the guardians of how you communicate, how your organization creates and sustains value, how you've performed, why you matter. That's a role that's just critically important. It's a role that people are starting to embrace. Make friends, be accountable, and understand how important the role is that you play. So that's it from digital for this year. Thank you.